First person I've got on my list is Mr. Aubrey, who was one of the people who came with us on some of the site visits. Mr. Aubrey.
Right, thank you. Can you hear me clearly?
I certainly can.
Right. I'm Crispin Aubrey from the Stop Hinkley group, which is a locally based campaign opposed to nuclear development on the Hinkley Point site. We have several hundred members and many more people on our mailing list. And I'm here to represent the many people in Somerset who are concerned about the fact that this is a nuclear power station proposed at Hinkley Point and all that entails in terms of dangers and hazards, but who feel disenfranchised by the examination process. The government has fixed the rules so that we are not allowed to raise fundamental issues of nuclear safety, such as the fact that this is a completely new and untested reactor design. In terms of the process itself, there is no opportunity for cross-examination of EDF's case by objecting organisations like ourselves or other individuals, as would happen at a proper public inquiry like the one held into the original Hinkley C proposal in the 1980s, at which Stop Hinkley was substantially represented. However, despite these limitations, I would argue that the panel should consider a number of important aspects of the project. Firstly, the risk of flooding at the site itself. EDF, as you all know, has devoted many pages of its application to this subject, and it is therefore right that the panel should consider ours and other people's comments. The sort of issues involved here include the risk of an unexpected event, such as a tidal wave or a tsunami, as happened along this coastline in 1607, and the unknown consequences of climate change. We have elaborated on these in our written representation. Secondly, the storage of radioactive waste at Hinkley C. This totally transforms this application from being just for a power station generating electricity into one for a long-term waste store for at least 100 years and possibly longer. The issues here are about the risks of the new type of high burn-up fuel being used in the reactor, the risk of flooding from the sea, and the possibility that even a century from now, there will still not be a final agreed resting place in this country for the large volumes of waste which will be produced. Given these uncertainties about whether a suitable location to receive highly radioactive waste from Hinkley Point will be available at any given time in the future, it must be prudent to adhere to the precautionary principle that no new nuclear power station should be allowed to proceed here or anywhere else in the UK until such a facility is actually operational. Thirdly, the adequacy of emergency plans. It cannot make sense, especially after the accident at Fukushima in Japan, to have an evacuation zone which stretches to just 2 miles. If an accident similar to the one at Fukushima happened here, then the town of Bridgewater, where we're sitting, with a population of 40,000 people, would have to be abandoned. Current emergency plans, even with their extendability, as it is called, simply do not reflect the reality of what might happen. Finally, it's essential that you consider the credibility of the applicants, EDF, whose employees were found guilty in a French court last November of deliberately spying on Greenpeace activists who had been peacefully demonstrating against plans for a nuclear power station. The court took their crime so seriously that it sent 2 employees of the security firm used by EDF to prison and awarded Greenpeace £428,000 in damages. £428,000. A company that indulges in this type of illegal activity in relation to a very similar project elsewhere is not a fit and proper body to take forward an application in this country. For all these reasons and others elaborated in our written representation, we would urge the examining panel to reject EDF's application.
Thank you. Any questions? No. Mr. Aubrey, I'm sure you realise that our remit is limited and that some of the matters that you're raising are matters that are probably more correctly directed either at government or at the Office of Nuclear Regulation.
Can I just make a few points just to justify the inclusion, which are not actually in, they're not actually in the written representation we've made. Right, the first point is that, as I've said, the EDF application refers to flooding at the site at some length. So it must make sense for us to be able to comment on it and for you to...
Oh, the EDF application and the environmental statement that accompanies it are matters that, the environmental statement covers all matters, not only matters within our remit.
Yeah.
I mean, you need to understand that EDF need effectively two major permissions in order to build this. One, which the Secretary of State may issue as a result of our examination, which is the development consent order.
Yep.
And the second one is that they do need a permit from the Health and Safety Executive in the guise of the Office of Nuclear Regulation to build a nuclear site or indeed to operate one. And one of the matters that the ONR will be looking at, because we did ask them a question, if you remember, at the first stage, is flooding of the site itself and the security of the site against all flood risks. They'll be advised, I'm sure, by the Environment Agency in that, because they're the expert body in this country. So flooding is within our remit, but not flooding of the site when operational.
Why then do you think EDF have devoted so much of their application to that subject? They must have considered it.
It is not for me, I'm afraid, Mr. Aubrey, to speculate on that.
Okay. The second point is on radioactive waste. I understand the local councils have raised this in their submission again.
Oh, a number of people have raised things,
yeah.
yes. And one of the things that will be within our remit certainly is looking at the volume of radioactive waste and whether they've made reasonable provision for that or proper provision for that. That is within our remit, I'm sure.
The volume?
The space available, is
right.
the site capable of handling it? The actual mechanics of looking after it, again, is the responsibility of the Office of Nuclear Regulation, in essence. So we won't be looking at actual radioactive waste safety.
Okay. Well, the final point is...
And again, the question of the final disposal site, which I think was something you raised, that's a matter of government policy.
The final point is that you have asked the Office of Nuclear Regulation and Environment Agency for their comments on various issues, including flooding emergency plans in particular. I think if you've done that, then you should consider comments made by us in relation to their response.
Well, if you wish to comment on the responses we got to our first questions, then there is the opportunity to do that, I think by the 31st of this month. Mark's nodding, so... Yes, there is a formal opportunity to do that in writing in any responses we get to our questions. So the responses are available on deposit, and they're also on the website if you've got access to the website.
Nonetheless, having, despite what you've just said about the other organisations...
I just wanted to warn you, really, that
yes,
not to shoot the messenger.
I understand what you're saying, but I think...
Go and see the government or go and see the ONR.
Nonetheless, I still think that you should make the effort and actually take the decision to look at these issues which are of concern, not just to me, many people in Somerset. You should consider them.
We understand entirely that they are of considerable concern to a number of people around here, of which you are, dare I say, the tip of the iceberg.
I'm glad you recognise that.
We've heard it a lot, but you'll also appreciate that we have, as you've said, our hands are tied, quite simply. We have a remit from government, and we can't go outside of that remit. Well, if we do, we'll be ignored.
I'm sorry?
If we do, I suspect we would be ignored or told to get back in.
Or you might be taken more seriously.
Inside our remit.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.